Millionaire disguises himself as a taxi driver and takes his own wife, and he discovers that she hides a devastating secret. He, in search of the truth, never imagined that he would be the last to know. While following her without her knowledge, a series of lies begins to unravel. The discovery changes everything and pushes their marriage to the brink of collapse. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll hear in your life. Monday morning arrived with its usual weight on Robert Mitchell's shoulders. At 42, he had achieved everything a man could dream of: a technology company valued at hundreds of millions, a mansion in the best neighborhood of Chicago, imported cars in the garage, and a bank account that grew even while he slept. But that morning, as he watched his wife Michelle prepare breakfast, a strange sensation took hold of his chest. Michelle moved around the kitchen with the natural elegance that had always enchanted him. Her brown hair fell softly over her shoulders, and the discreet smile she maintained while stirring the eggs in the pan should have reassured him. Should have, but it no longer did. There had been something different in recent months, something Robert couldn't define precisely, but that deeply bothered him. "Will you have lunch at home today?" asked Michelle, without raising her eyes from the frying pan. Robert carefully observed the question. It was simple, routine, but there was an almost imperceptible tension in her voice. Or was it just his imagination? He had become hypersensitive, had to every tone, every pause, every movement of his wife. "Depends on the meetings. Why, do you have plans?" Michelle hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering, a pause so brief that anyone else wouldn't have noticed, but Robert had developed an almost unhealthy ability to perceive these nuances. "No, nothing special. I might go out to do some shopping." Shopping. Always shopping. Robert knew his wife's habits, knew exactly which stores she frequented, which malls she usually spent her afternoons at. But lately, when he asked about her purchases, Michelle showed few bags, few results for so many hours away from home. Breakfast passed in silence. Robert pretended to read the news on his tablet while discreetly observing Michelle. She seemed distant, lost in thoughts he couldn't reach. When he stood up to say goodbye, as he had done every day for 8 years of marriage, the kiss he received was quick, almost automatic. At the office, Robert tried to concentrate on the spreadsheets of last quarter's results, but his mind insisted on wandering. During the meeting with the directors, while discussing expansion into the Argentine market, he found himself thinking about Michelle. What did she do during the long hours when he was working? Why did she lately seem so evasive when he asked about her day? The phone rang, interrupting his daydreams. It was Michelle. "Hi, honey. I'm going to be late today. I met a friend and we decided to have dinner together." "Which friend?" The question came out more abruptly than Robert intended. "Christine, you don't know her. We met at the cooking class." Cooking class? Since when did Michelle take a cooking class? She had always been an excellent cook, had learned from her mother since she was little. Why would she take a class now? "I didn't know you were taking a cooking class." "Oh, I started a few weeks ago. I forgot to mention it. You've been so busy." The line went silent for a few seconds. Robert felt his heart accelerating for no apparent reason. "Okay then, what time will you be back?" "I'm not sure exactly." "Don't wait up for me." When Michelle hung up, Robert stared at the phone for long minutes. There was something in her voice, a hurry, as if she wanted to end the conversation quickly. And this cooking class story came out of nowhere, like a too convenient explanation. That night, Robert arrived home at 10:30. The house was quiet and dark. Michelle had not yet returned. He went up to the bedroom but couldn't sleep. He lay in bed looking at the ceiling, listening to every noise from the street, waiting for the sound of keys in the door. It was almost 2 in the morning when he finally heard Michelle's car in the garage. He pretended to be asleep when she entered the bedroom, but noticed that she took longer than usual in the bathroom. When she finally lay down, Michelle didn't move close to him as she used to do. She stayed on her side of the bed, breathing, in a controlled way, as if she too was pretending to be asleep. The following days brought more disturbing signs. Michelle began receiving calls that she answered in other rooms. When Robert asked who it was, she always had an explanation. Her sister, a friend, the doctor. Always someone, always a plausible justification, but together they formed a pattern that left him restless. On Thursday, Robert decided to leave the office early. He wanted to surprise Michelle, maybe take her to dinner at her favorite restaurant, rekindle the intimacy he felt was being lost. But when he got home, he found only Carmen, the housekeeper. Mrs. Michelle left about 2 hours ago, Mr. Robert, said she was going to the mall. Robert went up to the bedroom and noticed that Michelle had changed clothes. The blouse she had worn in the morning was on the bed, and there was a different perfume in the air. It wasn't the perfume he had given her on her last birthday, nor any of the ones she usually wore. It was something new, more striking, more sensual. He sat on the edge of the bed, trying to organize his thoughts. Maybe he was being paranoid. Maybe Michelle was just going through some phase, some need for renewal that was natural after 8 years of marriage. But why wasn't she talking to him about it? Why this growing distance? When Michelle arrived at 8 in the evening, Robert was in the living room pretending to watch television. "How was the mall?" he asked, trying to maintain a casual tone. "Normal. I didn't buy anything, actually, just walked around a bit." Robert observed his wife's empty hands, the absence of any shopping bags. 4 hours walking without buying anything? Michelle stared at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. Was there irritation there? Or nervousness? "Sometimes it's good just to walk, think a little. You should try it." The response sounded defensive, almost aggressive. It wasn't Michelle's usual way of talking to him. Robert felt a knot in his stomach, a growing certainty that something was deeply wrong in his marriage. That night, lying next to his wife, who slept peacefully, Robert made a decision that would change everything. He would discover what Michelle was hiding from him. He could no longer bear the uncertainty, the half-truths, the feeling of living with a stranger. The man who had built a business empire based on precise information and calculated decisions couldn't accept being kept in the dark about his own life. Michelle was his wife, his companion, the woman he loved above all else. But who was she really? And why did he feel he was losing her without even understanding why? Friday dawned grey, with heavy clouds that perfectly mirrored Robert's mood. He had spent the night awake, mentally elaborating a plan to discover what Michelle was hiding. He could no longer live in that uncertainty that corroded him from within, like a silent acid. Michelle was preparing to go out, as she always did on Friday mornings. Robert observed her every movement through the bathroom mirror's reflection while shaving. She chose an outfit different from her usual, a low-cut blouse she rarely wore, and jeans that accentuated her silhouette. For whom was she dressing up? So much if she was just going shopping? "I'm leaving early today," said Michelle, applying a more vibrant lipstick than usual. "I have some things to take care of." What kind of things? Robert saw the hesitation in her reflection. Michelle paused for a second, the lipstick suspended in the air, before continuing to apply it. "Woman things. You wouldn't understand." The answer was cutting, definitive. Michelle had never spoken to him like that before. They had always shared everything, or at least Robert thought they had. When she finished getting ready and went down the stairs, he discreetly followed her to the garage. "I need to get some documents from the car," Robert lied, when Michelle looked at him questioningly. She shrugged and got into her silver BMW. Robert pretended to look for something in the drawer of his own car, while observing Michelle rummaging through her purse, apparently looking for something. When she finally left the garage, Robert noticed that she had forgotten her sunglasses on the passenger seat. It was the opportunity he needed. Robert waited a few minutes before approaching Michelle's car. The spare keys were on the house keychain, as always. He opened the BMW and sat in the driver's seat, breathing in the perfume Michelle had left in the environment. It was that new, different perfume he had noticed in recent days. He began a systematic search. First the glove compartment, car manuals, some gas station receipts, nothing extraordinary. Then the door pockets, some coins, an old piece of gum, a used tissue. Robert felt ridiculous searching his own wife's car, but he couldn't stop. It was when he lifted the carpet on the passenger side that he found it. a small white card with only one name printed in elegant lettering, Acacia Cafe, and an address Robert didn't recognize. He turned the card over and found something that made his heart race, a handwritten message in careful handwriting that said, "For Michelle with special affection, always waiting for you, Charlie." Charlie? Who the hell was Charlie? Robert held the card with trembling hands. The letters seemed to dance before his eyes, while 1,000 scenarios formed in his mind. Did Michelle have an admirer? Was she meeting another man? Was Acacia Cafe the place of their secret meetings? He put the card in his pocket and got out of the car, trying to maintain his composure. He needed more information before confronting Michelle. He couldn't just accuse her based on a card, however suspicious it seemed. At the office, Robert couldn't concentrate on anything. During the meeting with Japanese investors, his mind was completely elsewhere. He mumbled vague answers, agreed to proposals without analyzing them properly, and was saved only by his team's competence. "Is everything okay, Robert?" asked Sandra, his assistant for more than 5 years. "You seem a bit, distracted today." "I'm fine, just a little tired." Sandra didn't seem convinced, but didn't insist. Robert locked himself in his office and took the card from his pocket again. He typed Acacia Cafe into Google and found a small, cozy coffee shop located in Lincoln Park. From the photos, it looked like a romantic place, with intimate tables and vintage decor. Exactly the type of place where a person would take a romantic interest. At 2 in the afternoon, Robert made an impulsive decision. He told Sandra he had a doctor's appointment and left the office. He drove to Lincoln Park with his heart racing, not knowing exactly what he expected to find. Acacia Cafe was on a quiet street, between an antique shop and a small art gallery. Robert parked across the street and observed the movement. It was a charming place, frequented by a diverse audience, artists, intellectuals, young lovers, exactly the type of environment that Michelle would appreciate. He entered the cafe trying to appear casual. The ambiance was exactly as he had imagined, cozy with soft background music and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. He chose a discreet table from where he could observe the entire room. "What would you like?" asked a young waitress with colorful hair and a friendly smile. "An espresso, please." Robert stayed there for almost 2 hours, observing everyone who entered and left. He didn't see Michelle, but that didn't reassure him. Perhaps she came at other hours, perhaps on other days. The simple existence of that card in her car was sufficient evidence that she frequented the place. When he arrived home at 6 in the evening, Michelle was already there, preparing dinner as if it were any ordinary day. "How was your day?" she asked without raising her eyes from the pot. "Normal. And yours? Did you resolve your woman things?" Michelle looked at him quickly as if trying to detect some irony in the question. "Yes, I did. Nothing major." Robert decided to test a theory. "How about having dinner out tomorrow? There's a new place in Lincoln Park that they say is very good." Michelle's reaction was subtle, but Robert caught it. She stiffened slightly, her hands stopped, stirring the sauce for a fraction of a second. "Lincoln Park? I don't know, it's kind of far, isn't it?" "Since when do you care about distance? You love discovering new places." "It's just that I've been feeling a bit tired lately. I prefer to stay home on the weekend." Robert nodded, but inside his suspicion grew. Michelle had always been adventurous, always up for exploring new restaurants, new neighborhoods. Her refusal to go to Lincoln Park couldn't be a coincidence. During dinner, Robert observed his wife's every gesture. She seemed nervous, distracted, as if her mind were elsewhere. Several times he caught her looking at her cell phone, checking messages. "Someone important?" he asked when Michelle checked her phone for the 5th time. "Just my sister. She's having some problems." Robert had known Patricia, Michelle's sister, for years. He knew she lived in Washington, D.C., and rarely communicated with Michelle by text. She always preferred long phone calls on weekends. That night, lying in bed next to Michelle, who slept deeply, Robert made a decision he knew was drastic, but that seemed the only way to discover the truth. He would follow Michelle. He would find out where she really went, who she met with, what she was hiding from him. The plan began to form in his mind. He needed a disguise, a way to follow Michelle without being recognized. Then, like lightning, the idea struck. He would be a taxi driver. He could rent an ordinary car, wear different clothes, even change his appearance with a cap and sunglasses. Michelle would never suspect that the taxi driver taking her was her own husband. It was a risky plan, almost desperate, but Robert felt he had no choice. He needed the truth, even if it destroyed everything he believed he knew about his life and his marriage. Saturday dawned sunny, in total contrast to the storm forming in Robert's chest. He had spent the night organizing every detail of his plan. At 7 in the morning, while Michelle was still sleeping, he silently left the house with an excuse already prepared, an emergency meeting with foreign investors. The first stop was a department store in the west side of the city, far from any place that Michelle or their acquaintances frequented. Robert bought clothes completely different from his usual wardrobe: a simple checkered shirt, faded jeans, basic white sneakers, and a navy blue cap. On the way, he stopped at a barbershop and asked them to cut his hair shorter and shave his beard in a different way, leaving only a thin mustache. The transformation was surprising. When he looked at himself in the barbershop mirror, Robert barely recognized his own image. The elegant executive had disappeared, replaced by an ordinary man, the type who goes unnoticed on the streets of Chicago. The second part of the plan involved renting a car. Robert chose a small rental agency in a distant neighborhood and rented a white Corolla, common and discreet. He paid in cash and used documents from a fictional company he maintained for specific business. The rental agency employee barely looked at him, treating him like just another anonymous customer. Back home, Robert parked the rented car 3 blocks away and returned on foot. Michelle was already awake, having coffee on the porch. "How was the meeting?" she asked, without raising her eyes from the magazine she was browsing. "Productive. I'll have to go out again later." Michelle just nodded, apparently uninterested. Robert went up to the bedroom and pretended to work on his laptop while observing his wife's movements around the house. She seemed agitated, constantly checking her cell phone and changing clothes twice. At 10:30, Michelle announced she would be going out to meet a friend. "Which friend?" asked Robert, trying to sound casual. "Christine, from the cooking class. We're having lunch together." Robert nodded, but inside his heart raced. It was the second time Michelle mentioned this mysterious Christine. 15 minutes after Michelle left, Robert put on his disguise, took the keys to the rented car, and began following his own wife. Michelle drove for about 20 minutes until she reached downtown. Robert maintained distance, alternating between 2 and 3 blocks behind, as he had seen in movies. When Michelle parked in front of Acacia Cafe, Robert felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. His worst suspicions were being confirmed. He parked the Corolla at the corner, from where he could observe the cafe's entrance. Michelle went in, walking with hurried steps, like someone who arrives late for an important meeting. Robert stayed there for almost 2 hours, imagining increasingly painful scenarios. Who was Michelle meeting? What did they do during all this time? When Michelle finally left the cafe, Robert decided to put the riskiest part of his plan into action. He started the car and positioned himself strategically at the next corner, where he knew Michelle would have to pass. When he saw the silver BMW approaching, Robert turned on the improvised taxi sign he had prepared and waved to Michelle. To his surprise and terror, Michelle stopped. Robert felt his hands sweat when Michelle opened the passenger door and got into the car. For the first time in 8 years of marriage, his wife was inches away from him without recognizing him. "Good afternoon," said Michelle, settling into the seat. "Can you take me to the north side?" Robert almost choked upon hearing the familiar voice. He forced a change in his own voice, making it deeper and with an improvised country accent. "Sure, ma'am. What's the exact address?" Michelle gave an address in a simple neighborhood that Robert didn't even know existed. During the first few minutes of the trip, silence took over the car. Robert observed Michelle in the rearview mirror, noticing details he had never perceived: how she nervously played with the strap of her purse, how she bit her lower lip when thoughtful. "How long have you been working as a taxi driver?" asked Michelle, breaking the silence. Robert almost automatically answered with his real story, but controlled himself in time. About 5 years now, ma'am. It's a profession where you meet all kinds of people. Must be interesting. Meeting. Different stories every day. There was a melancholy in Michelle's voice that Robert had never noticed before. She seemed like a different person there, more vulnerable, more human than the elegant and controlled woman he knew. "Do you live in the north side?" asked Robert, trying to get more information. Michelle hesitated before answering. "No, it's just a visit. Family." "Yes, family." Another pause. Robert felt that Michelle was being careful with her words, as if she feared revealing too much to a stranger. The traffic was heavy, and the trip that would normally take 40 minutes extended to more than an hour. During that time, Robert observed Michelle reflect in silence, looking out the window with an expression he couldn't decipher. Was there sadness there? Nostalgia? Fear? As they approached the destination, Robert was shocked by the change in scenery. They left the busy avenues and entered narrow streets with simple houses and small businesses. It was a completely different world from the luxury environment in which they lived. "It's here at the next corner," said Michelle, indicating a small but well-maintained house. Robert stopped the car and watched Michelle pay for the ride. Her hands trembled slightly and she seemed nervous. "Thank you," she said, getting out of the car. Robert watched her walk to the door of the house and ring the doorbell. An elderly woman opened the door and hugged Michelle with an effusiveness that surprised him. It was a warm embrace, full of love and longing. Who was that woman? Why had Michelle never mentioned this visit? Robert parked the car a few houses away and decided to wait. He needed to understand what was happening, who these people were that Michelle visited in secret. The house was simple but clean, with a small, well-tended garden in front. Through the window he could see movement, people talking in the living room. 2 hours passed. Robert was beginning to feel ridiculous, spying on his own wife like a private detective. When the door of the house opened again, Michelle came out accompanied by the elderly woman and a middle-aged man. The three talked on the porch for a few minutes, and Robert could see that Michelle was emotional. She was wiping her eyes with a handkerchief and hugging the two people with affection. When Michelle began heading toward the street looking for another taxi, Robert made an impulsive decision. He started the car and approached her again. "Need a ride, ma'am?" Michelle looked at him with surprise. "You're still here?" "I was coming back this way and saw you on the street. Coincidence." Michelle got into the car again, but this time Robert noticed she was different. There were dried tears on her face and an expression of pain he had never seen before. "Where to now, ma'am?" Michelle gave the address of their home, but her voice sounded distant, as if she were lost in deep thoughts. During the way back, Robert struggled internally between the desire to reveal his identity and confront Michelle and the need to better understand what he had witnessed. Who were those people? Why did Michelle visit them secretly, and why was she so emotional? The return trip took place in a silence charged with emotions. Robert observed Michelle in the rearview mirror and saw that she was struggling to hold back tears. Her hands trembled slightly, and she breathed irregularly like someone trying to compose themselves after an intense moment. When they were just 5 minutes from home, Robert made the bravest decision of his life. He couldn't take the charade anymore, that distance between them. He needed the truth, whatever the cost. He parked the car on a side street, away from the traffic. "Why did you stop?" asked Michelle, raising her eyes for the first time during the trip. Robert turned off the engine and turned completely to face her. He removed the cap and sunglasses slowly, revealing his face. "Michelle." Recognition came gradually. First confusion, then astonishment, and finally, an expression of absolute horror. "Robert, what? How? Why are you?" Michelle stammered, unable to form complete sentences. "I needed to know the truth." Robert's voice came out hoarse, laden with pain. "You've been acting so strangely, so distant. I found the Acacia Cafe card in your car." Michelle put her hands over her face and began to cry. They weren't delicate tears, but deep sobs that seemed to come from a very intimate place in her soul. "You followed me. You pretended to be a taxi driver to spy on me," she murmured, between tears. "Michelle, please explain to me what's going on. Who is Charlie? Who were those people in the house? Why have you been lying to me?" Michelle raised her face, and Robert saw a vulnerability in her that he had never witnessed. His elegant and controlled wife had disappeared, replaced by a fragile, frightened woman. Charlie is my brother." "Your brother? But you said you only had one sister." Michelle took a deep breath, like someone preparing to dive into deep waters. "I lied, Robert. I lied about so many things." Her voice came out in a whisper. "Those people in the house, they were my parents." Robert felt as if the world were spinning around him. "Your parents? But you said your parents that they were no longer here." "They're alive, Robert. They always have been. They live in that simple house, work hard to survive. My father is a doorman at a commercial building. My mother is a housekeeper. Charlie works in an auto repair shop." Robert remained silent, trying to process the information. "When we met," continued Michelle, "you were so successful, came from such a structured family. I fell madly in love with you, but I was afraid that if you knew the truth about my origins, you would reject me." "Michelle, let me finish, please." She dried her eyes with the back of her hand. "I made up this story about my parents having passed away because I thought it would be easier. I created a version of myself that I thought you would approve of. But the lie grew, becoming increasingly complex." Robert felt his heart broken into 1,000 pieces, not by the revelation of Michelle's humble origins, but by the pain she had carried alone all these years. "During these 8 years of marriage," Michelle continued, "I visited my family, in secret. They know I'm married, but I never introduced them to you. They think you don't want to meet them. My father once said it must be difficult for a rich man to accept poor in-laws." Robert felt a deep shame taking over him. What kind of person had he become for his wife to feel she needed to hide her own family? "Acacia Cafe is where I meet Charlie sometimes. It's halfway between our house and our parents' house. We talk there when I need advice, when the longing becomes too much." "And today? What happened today that left you so emotional?" Michelle began to cry again. "My mother is sick, Robert. She needs surgery, but their health insurance doesn't cover it. I've been trying to help financially without you noticing, but I don't have access to such large amounts. Today I went there to say that maybe it was time for me to tell you everything." Robert got out of the car and went to the passenger door. He opened it and knelt before Michelle, holding her hands. "Michelle, my love, forgive me. Forgive me for creating an environment where you felt you needed to lie. Forgive me for being so blind to your feelings. You're not angry. You're not disappointed in me." Robert looked into the eyes of the woman he had loved for 8 years and saw, for the first time, who she really was. Not the polished version she'd created to impress him, but the real woman with her history, her struggles, her incredible strength. "Angry? Michelle, I'm amazed. You are much stronger and braver than I imagined. You built an entire life protecting the people you love. But I lied to you. And I was an idiot for not creating a safe space where you could be who you really are." Robert helped her out of the car and hugged her right there on the street under the afternoon sun. It was a different hug from all they had shared before, because for the first time in 8 years, there were no lies between them. "I want to meet your family, Michelle. I want to meet your parents, your brother. I want to take care of your mother's surgery. I want to be part of your real life, not just the version you created for me." Michelle was crying, but now they were tears of relief. "What if they don't like you? What if they think you're arrogant?" Robert smiled for the first time in weeks. "Then I'll have to prove I can be different. I'll have to show that the man you chose to love is worth it." 2 weeks later, Robert found himself in the simple but welcoming living room of Michelle's parents' house. Mrs. Connie, a small woman but with a strong personality, served coffee in mismatched cups while telling stories of Michelle's childhood. Mr. Carl, a man of few words but gentle gaze, showed Robert old photos of his daughter. Michelle was always a dreamer, said Mrs. Connie. Since she was little, she talked about seeing the world, about studying, about having a different life from ours. And she succeeded, said Robert. She's the most amazing woman I know. Charlie, Michelle's brother, who had initially been suspicious of Robert, now talked with him about football and politics. On the Acacia Cafe card, the affectionate message was just from a brother who missed his sister. Mrs. Connie's surgery was a success. Robert not only paid all the expenses, but also arranged for her to be treated by the best doctors in Chicago. When Michelle saw her mother recovering in the private hospital, she hugged Robert with a gratitude that came from the bottom of her heart. "Thank you for accepting me as I am," she whispered in his ear. "Thank you for teaching me what really matters in life," Robert replied. Months later, Robert and Michelle's house became the stage for Sunday lunches with the family. Mrs. Connie taught Robert how to make her famous lasagna, while Mr. Carl helped him with small repairs around the house, refusing to let Robert pay a professional. Robert discovered that true wealth wasn't in his bank account, but at the bountiful Sunday table, surrounded by people who loved him for who he was, not for what he owned. Michelle flourished by finally being able to be authentic, and their marriage strengthened in a way Robert had never imagined possible. One night, lying in bed after a family dinner, Michelle asked, "Do you regret discovering the truth?" Robert pulled her closer. "Michelle, that day in the taxi was the day I truly married you, because it was when I met who you truly are." And there, in that bedroom that had been the scene of so many nights of distrust and distance, Robert and Michelle found a new intimacy, based on total honesty and unconditional love. The mansion remained large and luxurious, but now it was full of real life, genuine laughter, true stories, and a love that had been tested and emerged stronger than ever. The end. Dear listeners, we hope that Robert and Michelle's story has deeply touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories that explore the mysteries of the human heart. You can find it by clicking here to your left. If this narrative moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Every day we bring unique stories that celebrate the complexity of life, love, and human relationships. Don't miss our upcoming content and tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced a situation where you discovered something surprising about someone